right, hi, welcome to Fiveable. Let me get my screen going here. I'm Carolyn Castellanos. I'll be your host for tonight, and we are doing stimulus-based multiple choice questions. And so Eric Beckman, who's our lead AP World History teacher, and I worked on recreating College Board style questions, and we can't just use theirs because, they're copyrighted, but there is a pattern. And so we're going to show you all of that and let us know how we did in the end, like after you're taking your exams, if you kind of see the patterns and if we helped. And anyways, I'm pretty excited. I know practice questions aren't exactly fun, but it's the only way you get better and better at this course. Okay, well, before we move on, remember, follow us on social media. And then we've been putting some polls on Twitter. So that's been kind of fun. I've been trying to do that before my stream. So I won't spend too much time talking about what's on the AP exam because I think y'all already know. But just in case, we'll go over this. And then feel free to ask a question in the chat or whatever. We're here to, interact. Okay, so on the AP exam, you've got 55 questions in 55 minutes. So it's a minute per question. And that sounds like, okay, yeah, I can do that. But they add on the stimulus or a reading passage or a political cartoon that may be kind of hard to, annotate and figure out what's going on. So that minute per question goes by pretty fast. And so that's why we're always practicing, right? Because you've got to be pretty quick. And then it's 40% of the exam. Now, I'm always emphasizing writing because that's 60% of the exam, but you've got to be good at your multiple choice as well. Okay, so what we do as teachers, we look for patterns, right? We're always trying to hack. How can I hack or crack the AP exam? And so one of the big things, right, is it's stimulus-based. So there's a stimulus, meaning a text, right? So a reading passage. It can be a primary text or secondary, a map, an illustration, political cartoon. And then you'll have 3 or 4 questions follow somewhat related to that stimulus. So they may be interpreting it or somewhat loosely related. Okay. So you've got your stimulus, and I'll show you this with an actual example. So say you've got a reading passage. The first question usually involves interpreting the stimulus. So if you read it, you understand it, you'll get that first question right. The second one is usually also interpreting the stimulus, but maybe making some kind of a larger connection. So you've got to have a little more background information to make that connection. And then the third question is usually just recalling facts. It's somewhat related to the stimulus, but if you didn't have that stimulus, you could still answer the question. And then the fourth question, if there's a fourth one, is some sort of synthesis, right? So this is often comparing something across time periods. Your teachers may not put a lot of these on your tests at the beginning of the school year because you haven't gone through enough history to be able to answer something that's happening in the future. And then you'll start to see these pop up a lot during second semester. But I did put in some examples so you can see. Okay, so that's what we found. So as we go through, I'm going to kind of be pointing those out. And if you're always kind of, thinking about this, it can also help you if you're stuck on a question okay, just go back to that document, or it's the third question. Maybe that document confused me. Can I answer this without it? Okay. And then our questions also are going to involve, skills, right? And so everything in AP is usually based around comparison. So compare and contrast similarities and differences. And often that's what the question's asking, or cause and effect. Change in continuity over time. So sometimes it might be a question like that fourth question could be about women's status, so, we've got patriarchy, women are kind of second-class citizens, lower social status. in, say, the 1200s. Has that really changed by the 1500s? Well, not really, right? And so there's a lot of that. Of course, historical contextualization. And so they're really asking what's going on in the time period. And we've got examples of that. And then point of view. Okay, is everybody with me so far? Move on. All right. Okay, so let's see if we see those patterns. Okay, so here's our first question. So this one we're not going to answer in the polls. All right. And then I went ahead and I kind of pre-highlighted so you could see how I would annotate this question. All right, so obviously this is our stimulus. Okay, we'll read out loud. Your servant begs leave to say that Buddhism is no more than a cult of barbarian peoples. So when I'm reading these, I'm looking kind of for keywords, important stuff. All right, so Buddhism obviously is no more than a cult of barbarian peoples. Okay, so is this saying Buddhism is good or bad? And we would probably go with one, you're calling it a cult. That would have a negative connotation there. And so I would say this is bad. Okay, so off right from the start, we know he's not being really, he's not really being very favorable towards Buddhism. Okay, so next part. All right, so Buddhism is no more than a cult of barbarian peoples which spread to China in the time of the latter Han. Okay, may not have covered the Han Dynasty, but I don't think that's super important right now. It did not exist here in ancient times. When Emperor Gozu received the throne from the House of Sui, he deliberated upon the suppression of Buddhism. All right, so we're looking for what's going on. So he's already calling Buddhism a cult, and he said it wasn't here before, and then the new emperor thought about suppressing Buddhism, but it sounds like he didn't. But at that time, the various officials, being of small worth and knowledge, were unable to comprehend the ways of the ancient kings and exigencies of past and present, and so could not implement the wisdom of the emperor and rescue the age from corruption. Okay, there was a lot in there. So what I do here is, if I kind of, you might want to, kind of define these words quickly, but basically this one I would just cross out, right? I would say unable to comprehend the ways of the ancient kings of past and present, and you've still got the gist of that. Okay, so what do we think? Is he, and then we've got Han Yu, a Chinese scholar. Actually, I just made a mistake. You always go and look at the source first. All right, so this is a Chinese scholar writing this, and he's not looking very favorable upon Buddhism, right? And it looks like it was introduced, it's something new. They thought about suppressing it, not allowing it. And he's saying that, those who decided to let it happen were not very wise, right? And the kind of corrupt at this point. Okay, so y'all want to try answering this one? All right, get that to go. Okay, so Allie, you're doing bad. Uh-oh, what's wrong? Do I need to re-explain something, or was it the passage, or was that just, I don't know. Tell me more and I'll help you out. Okay, all right. Well, let me know though, because I can re-explain something or go back. So yeah, this is so much harder than being in the classroom, right? I can't like see your faces, but if you want to type it out, I'll go ahead and go back to it and answer any question you have. All right, so let's see about answering this question. So this stimulus is going to, go with several questions. All right, so which of the following describes the author's view of Buddhism? So A, it has spread to China and enriched its cultural ways of thought. Well, maybe not. It has always been a cultural tradition in China and is a defining characteristic of Chinese identity. Well, we know it can't be that one because he's saying it's new. Okay, good. Go ahead and answer in the chat. contemplating, C or D. Okay, good, y'all are on the right track. It threatens traditional Chinese cultural traditions, or D, it was always opposed by the Chinese bureaucracy. All right, so this answer is C. It threatens Chinese cultural traditions, right? Okay, so it's not A. A would be if it was a positive, right? A positive passage. B, we know it's something new, so how could it have always defined Chinese identity? And then we're looking at C or D. So if it was always opposed by the bureaucracy, then it can't be that one because the bureaucracy does allow it or the emperor allows it for a while, but I see where that's kind of tricky. And so with College Board, they say pick the best answer. And sometimes you're like, yeah, but if I really argue, it could be D or C, but you got to think best answer and you can't go ask your teacher, right? So, okay, does that make sense? Let's keep going. Okay, and then I wrote these questions so they may not be totally perfect. All right, so this is where, so this one is basically an example of, to answer the question, you had to be able to interpret the passage. So that's what we said question 1 usually is like. Okay, let's look at question 2. How did the Chinese resolve the sentiments expressed above? All right, so what do we mean resolve? So we're going back to the passage. So here you're saying, okay, they were thinking about not allowing Buddhism, but then they allowed it. And now he's saying, well, look, it pretty much corrupted us. This is not a good way. So what did they do to kind of, resolve the issue? Should we have Buddhism or not? Okay, so let's read these. Let's go through these. Okay. So A, they replaced both Confucianism and Buddhism with a new modern philosophy. Maybe. They reconciled logical, philosophical approaches to happiness with long-standing traditions of filial piety. Do we all know what filial piety is? They elevated the status of merchants in Chinese society. Okay, good. Thanks, Allie. Respect for your elders. So filial piety is a Confucian ideal, right? And so this is kind of your 5 relationships where the ruler is over the subjects, the father is over the sons, the husband over the wife, older brother over younger brother, and then friend to friend. And so, and then that respect for the family and the elders. So, and then D, they spread Confucian ideas to Eastern Asia, including Japan, Korea, and Vietnam. All right, well, I think we can cross out D, right? D doesn't really seem to make sense, right? That's about spreading it, not about kind of resolving, deciding whether we should have Buddhism or not. Okay, so any ideas on the answer to this one? This one's kind of hard. Okay, all right. B, yes. Okay, so this one is, A is saying they replaced both of them with something else. Well, we know that didn't happen because Confucianism is going to persist, Buddhism persists. And what is this describing? This is actually describing kind of a new philosophy. This is describing Neo-Confucianism. So Neo-Confucianism was a mix of Buddhism and Confucianism. And so this logical, philosophical approach would be Buddhism, and then the filial piety would be Confucianism. So this is actually a really hard question because it's not so much about the passage, it's do you know what Neo-Confucianism is? And we're not saying the word Neo-Confucianism. But sometimes you'll get questions like this. So you've really got to be a detective. Now, is anyone scared about having to work through a question like that in 1 minute? Yeah, for sure. Me too. I'm scared for you, Allie, but you can do it. You can do it. You get much faster and you'll get better at this. And the reading passages get easier as time goes on. One, you get better at reading them, and then the language is different. You're reading something from Confucianism, from Confucius, he's hard to read. But as you get into things in the 19th and 20th century, it gets a little bit easier. Okay, one more. We're going to be stuck with this passage for a while. Okay, so that second one showed you had to know what the passage meant, but then it was a larger connection, right? It was really asking about Neo-Confucianism in like the hardest way possible. Okay, let's see. So if my theory is right, this question is basically like recalling facts or content, but you don't necessarily need the passage. Okay, which branch of Buddhism promoted the practice of materialism and allowed wealth accumulation? All right, Tibetan, Zen, Theravada, or Mahayana? All right, y'all can go ahead and answer that in the chat if you want. All right, so we've had to, this year we've had to expand into more branches of Buddhism. This is my favorite one because I think I understand it the best. Okay, all right, y'all are being shy. So this was Mahayana Buddhism. Okay, all right, Camilo, thanks for joining in there. So Mahayana Buddhism is the one where it kind of morphs, because remember, original Buddhism says you should reject your desires, right? Wealth, wanting things, materialism is only going to make you unhappy. It's going to make you suffer when you can't have those. But how do you reconcile that with all the wealth on the Silk Road, right? And everyone wants to be wealthy, so they create this new branch of Buddhism called Mahayana. And it says, no, it's fine. You can be rich as long as you donate to your monastery. Okay, all right. So the patterns and the questions. All right. So, where was I going with that? Okay. So yeah, basically those were the patterns, right? So first one, totally interpreting the passage. Second, probably some interpretation and then some other connection. And then the third one is pure kind of facts. All right. So now we're going to also look in, some of the next questions are going to bring in comparison, cause and effect, or change in continuity, contextualization, point of view, and even some argumentation, which I usually find that through purpose. Like, what's the purpose of this document, or what is the author arguing? Okay, we ready for some more? All right. Okay, so I forgot to do this on the first one. Always read the caption first, right? Often there's an explanation, there's a date, an author. There's something that's going to help you out, especially when you're just kind of stuck and you're like, I don't remember covering any of this. If you do have a good sense of dates, that can often help you out. So, well, I'll get to that. That'll be got an example for that, but that'll be later on. Okay, underline or circle your important nouns or verbs, words that help you get the meaning of the stimulus. And I've kind of pre-highlighted all of those. Cross out unnecessary words like exigencies. I can't even say that. It didn't, like knowing that word or not knowing it didn't help me. Okay, try to add a synonym. All right. And we'll kind of practice these. Okay, so cross out answer choices that you know are wrong or make no sense, right? So you always, they say the more that you mark up a test, the better that you do. And I've even given my students extra credit. I want to see you marking up your test, and I'll give you 5 points extra credit, because what I hate is when we do test corrections and not a single mark on the paper. So I can't see like your thought process, did you cross out the, did you narrow it down to the 2 closest, or were you just guessing? And so, so it's always good to do. Okay, now this is just general test taking, although it almost never works for College Board, but it might help you in other things. So look for patterns in the answer choices. So if it's fall of Gupta Empire, fall of Mauryan Empire, fall of Roman Empire, and then rise of an empire, it's gotta be this rise, right? Now, this probably works in some of your state tests, like in Texas, we have the STAR test. College Board is never going to have it that easy for you, but I don't know. Sometimes it might work. All right. Okay, we're ready for our next one. Okay, this one, let's go through the document. I did type them into the polls, so if you want to answer in the polls, feel free. If you just want to do it in the chat, we can, or I can just go through them. Kind of let me know. And then I'm really bad about giving y'all enough like answer time, so wait time. So kind of let me know if I'm going too fast or too slow. Okay. All right, so let's follow my advice here. Okay, so who wrote this? Yuan Kai, Advice About Women, 12th Century. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and tell you this is from China. I like this, Advice About Women. And so this 12th century would be 1100s. Okay, so basically in our time frame. Okay, so let's see what this guy is. Wonderful advice about women. Okay, so some wives with stupid husbands are able to manage the family's finances. All right, so if we know anything about China, if your husband is competent, he's managing the finances, right? Women are in no way, shape, or form supposed to be doing that. But if your husband's stupid, you got to step in. Okay, calculating the outlays and receipts of money and grain without being cheated by anyone. Okay, so some are really competent. Of those with degenerate husbands, there are also some who are able to manage finances with the help of their sons without ending in bankruptcy. Okay, so degenerate obviously sounds pretty bad. So I think he's going with, maybe someone who's, say, an alcoholic or a gambler, right? He's going to waste the family fortune. With the help of her sons, she can actually, kind of outwit the husband and save them from bankruptcy. Even among those whose husbands have died and whose sons are young, there are occasionally women able to raise and educate their sons, keep the affection of all of their relatives, manage the family business, and even prosper. Okay, so there's women who, whether their husband is stupid, degenerate, or has died, who can manage the money, right? Keep the estate going, the business. Oh, and I thought this was cute. Not lose the affection of all of their relatives, right? So that's actually, really important for women in that time frame. Make sure they don't upset their family. Okay, all of these are wise and worthy women. All right, so hopefully we understand the passage. Okay, so Yuan Kai's opinion of the role of women in finances is most likely a product of which of the following? Okay, don't look at the answer in the chat. A, the widespread practice of gender equality in imperial China, the class-based distinctions between rules of behavior for the elite and for commoners, a decline in following the Confucian virtue of filial piety, or D, the social expectation that Chinese women should be economically dependent on their male relatives. All right, I'm going to check the poll real quick and see if anybody answered in there. Okay, I've got some votes for C. Okay, yeah, I didn't label C, so let me get my stream back here. All right, where's my answer? Oh. There we go. Okay. Sorry, my screen isn't exactly like yours. Okay, so our answer was D, the social expectation that Chinese women should be economically dependent on their male relatives. All right, so A doesn't really work because he's really not promoting gender equality. He's kind of talking about the exception to the rule, right? These are some women who sometimes end up in the situation of having to manage the finances. But he's not really saying like all women should be doing this. So it would not be gender equality. B, the class-based distinctions between rules of behavior for elite and commoners. Well, this is women versus men. So we're going to cross that out. A decline in following the Confucian virtue of filial piety. Not really about that. D, so there is that social expectation that women should be economically dependent on their male relatives, right? They should get married, have kids, and then the finances is the role of men. Okay, and so this question is really, you've got to be able to interpret the passage, and then it's really looking at point of view, right? Okay. All right, let's try the second one. So which of the following describes the main purpose for Yuan Kai writing advice about women? Okay, so why does he write this? All right. A, to inform and entertain the public with anecdotes about the lives of great Chinese women. Maybe. B, to explain that women may often be able to live up to the social norms expected of men. To argue that Chinese social norms mistreated women and call for reform. To illustrate the different rules of behavior for elite women and common women. Okay, do we need more wait time on that one? A second. Yeah, this is so hard because I can't see y'all. Okay, hold on. I'll hold on. Good. All right, I'll let y'all. Well, I'll check the poll while y'all do that. Yeah, this is also my problem in class. Everyone's like, stop, stop. I'm like, oh. And I know it takes longer to type, and I should probably stop talking so you can concentrate. Okay. All right, so this one is B, to explain that women may often be able to live up to the social norms expected of men. All right, so it wasn't just to tell the stories. C, they're not really saying women are mistreated. D, to illustrate different rules for elite and common. We kind of already went over that. All right, but if you couldn't understand the passage, you would get really mixed up on these questions, right? Okay, so, all right, so that's purpose. Let's do it again. I got another one here. I think I made 5 questions with this stimulus. Okay, which of the following religions in the 13th century expressed the most stringent ideals of patriarchy? Okay, my students always ask me what stringent means, strict. All right, so which of the following religions in the 13th century expressed the most strict ideals of patriarchy? And then hopefully we all know what patriarchy is, right? Men are kind of above in the social status, and women have to, defer to men. They have all the power. Okay, so this is your recall of facts. All right, so which religion, I guess, is the most patriarchal? Okay, yep, okay. All right, Hinduism, good. So this is the recall of facts. If you remember Hinduism with the sati, the widow burning, right? And the strict kind of caste system, women kind of had it even worse. All right, good. Okay, so y'all all seem pretty good on Hinduism. Okay, let's try another one. Which of the following best describes how the status of women changed in China? Okay, so this is one of those good kind of change or continuity over time. Okay, and all right, so this one we jump way ahead. I already see 1949 in there, so you may or may not know, but I got a feeling you guys know. Okay, so here we're looking for like a correct answer. Which one of these actually happened? Okay, the spread of Buddhism eventually led to gender equality. The Industrial Revolution led to increased value of women's ability to work and contribute to the economy. The Communist Revolution, beginning in 1949, led to a policy of increased gender equality in the workplace. Or D, the Mongol rule in the 13th century led to an increased influence of gender equality in China. All right, so y'all probably haven't covered all of this. I hope you haven't done Communist China yet, because then I'm way behind. This one, okay. Oh, you guessed A. Okay. Well, yeah. So being at the beginning of the class, you're probably, okay. Well, if you're at the beginning of our class, you're thinking A. Well, right, we talk about how Buddhism promotes gender equality, social equality, and so then you get this wrong. But at the end of the year, after you've covered communism, you're going to pick C, right? Okay, so B, the Industrial Revolution, women start to work more, doesn't really lead to much. It's actually World War I where women really step in and work, that they get the right to vote in the US and a lot of European countries, is when they prove themselves in World War I. So that's a little bit after in the Industrial Revolution. And then communism, there's a great communism DBQ from College Board, and it's all about, it has women in like doctors' uniforms and scientists, and they're really promoting women getting out there in the workforce. And so that's really going to be the answer there. Okay, but you're not expected to know that yet. Just giving you an idea. Okay, we might have to pick up the pace, so we're never going to finish this in an hour. Okay, one more on this stimulus. Which of the following best describes the historical situation in China depicted in the text above? Okay, so this is asking you for historical context. So what's going on in this? It says 12th century, which is 1100s. The course, this era is 1200 to 1400, but it's basically the same thing. Okay, so what is happening in time here? A, the conquest of the Mongols, an institution of pastoral, social, and gender ideals. B, the economic prosperity of the period led Chinese scholars to adopt an optimistic view of the future. C, the practice of Confucianism by the ruling class led Chinese scholars to explore proper gender and social relationships. Or D, the shrinking territory under the Song Dynasty led Chinese scholars to question the emperor's political power. Ooh, that was a lot. Okay. So what's going on, but also related to the past? Oh, pastoral, perfect. Pastoral means like nomad. So if you're pastoral, you usually herd sheep, horses, cows, and they typically tend to be, like you could just be shepherds with your goats, but the Mongols are nomadic, right? So they have their horses and goats and stuff, and they travel around and migrate around. Okay, so you probably haven't gotten to the Mongols yet, but that's okay. They're a little bit later. Okay, let's go for this one. All right, so it's C. The practice of Confucianism by the ruling class led Chinese scholars to explore proper gender and social relationships. Okay, well, so they're not actually, okay, good, Ethan, you got it right. So the Mongols didn't really spread a lot of gender equality. They tried, but it didn't really happen. China didn't buy into it. The economic prosperity, like the optimistic future, okay, I mean, that's just too vague, right? And then the shrinking territory led them to question the emperor's political power. Well, it's not really about that, right? So we got to look at something. And so this, kind of gender and social relationships should tip us off there. Okay, let's get into, oops, I lost my PowerPoint. Let's get into something else. We're never going to finish. Okay. Oh, good. Okay, I want to thank Ton for his awesome image here. All right, it's a little small. I hope we can read it. Okay, so finally, not a passage. Now we need to kind of annotate these two. Okay, so population and wages in England from about 1300 to 1800. And this is number of laborers in Europe and wages paid. All right, so we know we're in Europe. Anybody know what was happening in Europe around this time, maybe? Any big event? Okay, so we want to see, okay, so this is number of laborers. So your laborers, your workers goes down. All right, so something happens here and then it booms. All right, so there's a population decline and then it goes up. And then wages, okay, so when the population goes down, the wages go up. All right, that is our important thing here. All right, so that's what we want to know. Okay, the change in population and wages in the chart above is best understood in the context of which of the following wider Afro-Eurasian developments. Okay, so what caused this? What major number of workers go down? Okay, A, the temporary climate change during the Little Ice Age. B, military conquest and growth of the Abbasid Empire, which would be one of our Islamic empires. C, the spread of epidemic diseases. Or D, the Crusades. What disease are they talking about? All right, Ethan, Yessie, Ali. Okay, the plague, the Black Plague. All right, you guys got it. Okay, not the Crusade. Oh, so kind of put that up there. So not the Crusades. It's going to be the Black Plague. And see here where they're not saying the Black Plague, they're saying epidemic diseases, just like we didn't put Neo-Confucianism. And the students are like, well, why don't they just put that? Because that would make it too easy. All right, so you've got to know epidemic means large, widespread disease. All right, so there's a lot going on here. Okay, the Crusades did not kill, well, remember the Black Plague kills 1/3 to half of the population. So the Crusades is only going to kill soldiers, right? There weren't a whole lot of civilian casualties in that. So it's not going to be that. But yeah, you narrowed it down to the right choices. Okay, let's keep going so we finish. All right. Second one, trends depicted in the chart most directly contributed to which of the following? All right, so here's where we've got to go back. So when population decreases, right, so we don't have enough workers. And so remember, this is the time of feudalism where the peasants had to farm the land. Okay, so half the population dies, no one's farming. So the ones who survived the plague, now they're starving. And so they've got to get people to farm. So the farmers, these peasants or serfs, are like, yeah, you know what? I don't really like working for free for you anymore. Like, you're forcing me to farm your land. How about you pay me, right? How about I get a bigger share of the crop or payment? And so the peasants are going to start kind of demanding more. Ooh, I think I gave away the answer. I'm not supposed to do that. Okay. All right. So the trends depicted in the chart most directly contributed to which of the following? A, peasant revolts against serfdom. B, an expansion of papal and church authority. C, a decline in technological and scientific innovations. Or D, a decrease in military conflicts. Okay. All right, good. You guys got that. Okay, so the peasant revolt, right? Sorry, I kind of gave that away. Oh, serfdom, yes. Okay. But there was a great stream on this, that I gave on Tuesday, but you can go back and watch that. But no, I will obviously for sure answer it. Okay, so Rome falls, right? Rome was a great empire, right? Thriving, and they keep getting invaded by barbarians, and they basically fall apart. So your whoever's left, they kind of retreat into the countryside. So the cities fall apart, and they go in these little kingdoms. And so don't think like the big king of England. Think some little tiny king of like the county you live in, right? And so this king has land, he has a castle, and he divides up his land. He gives land to the lords. And so then the lords give land to the knights, and the knights are the protection from these potential barbarian invaders. And then the serfs are basically your peasants. So they don't give the peasants land, but they let the peasants live on their land. They actually have to live on their land, and they have to farm it. And in return for farming the Lord's land, they're given protection from these potential invaders. And it sounds like there were enough of these little invasions that they did need protection. And so one little king might be like, man, I want to go take Gonzales County over there, right? I want to go take his, kingdom. And so there was a lot of fighting. I kind of think, I don't know if you watch Game of Thrones, but it's a lot of connections to the medieval time frame here. But yeah, so serfs are these peasants that farm the Lord's land. They're tied to it. They're born into this, and they can't leave. They are always a peasant. They always have to farm. And so I think someone was doing a stream, something with Varun or Jed, that might further explain that. But we've had past streams or future ones that'll kind of explain that a little bit better. Okay, let's do the last one in this one. The economic situation of laborers in the chart is most similar to, okay, this is jumping in the future, so you may not know this. So this is going off the serfdom, right? So with this one, you need to know it's Europe, it's Middle Ages, it's serfdom. The dates can help you out. Okay, Eric, thank you, Eric. Serfdom is when peasant families are bound to the land. All right, there you go. So this is really asking for what was a similar system to serfdom. So A, conscripted soldiers of the Ottoman Janissary. That doesn't really sound like serfdom. Peasants in the Spanish encomienda system. Incas under the Mita system, or slaves in Afro-Eurasia. Okay, let's check back with Eric. Said bound to the land means they can't leave. If someone buys the land, the serfs come with it. Yeah. Yes, this one's in the future, so I'll give you this one. The peasants in the Spanish encomienda system. So when the Spanish conquered the Americas, it's basically they bring over feudalism, and the serfs are now the Native Americans, and they have them farm their plantations there. So we wanted, oh, APUSH, yes. Oh, you took APUSH first. Usually we do world, in Texas you do world and then APUSH, but these classes feed off each other, so awesome. So you haven't gotten to this yet, but I wanted to kind of show the pattern so you can think about that as you're taking your tests. Okay. Oh, awesome. That was in your reading. Okay. We love it about feudalism. Okay, good. All right. So let's do something a little different. Okay. I have 2 more sets. Okay. All right. So this is a passage. Well, let's read it. Okay. So let's look at our source. Nizam al-Mulk, a senior advisor to the Sultan. All right. Sultan of the Muslim Seljuk Empire. And it's from the Book of the Government. Okay, so this guy might have trouble with the comparison. Yeah. And so on my tests, I don't put those in. I'm not going to put something we haven't covered, but I thought, we'd expose you to it. And then, when you get that test, you're gonna be like, oh yeah, I remember there was something about this. But just to get you to, start thinking about those connections. So when you do feudalism, and then, in a couple of chapters later, when you do encomienda, you're going to be like, oh, yeah, right? It's basically the same system. Okay, awesome. All right, so let's read this one. Okay, so senior advisor to the Sultan, Muslim Seljuk Empire, the Seljuk Empire. The Seljuk Turks took over the Abbasid Empire, right? So one of our Islamic empires, and the Seljuk Turks will keep Islam. They just kind of take over. Okay, so this one's a little bit different. In the past, many Muslim rulers have had the following practices regarding the training of military slaves. Okay, so we do have one of those answer choices before was like military conscription. So some took slaves and trained them in the military, as we'll see here. After young male slaves had been bought for government service, they would be given gradual advancement in rank, according to their length of service, education, skill, and general merit. Thus, after a ghulam, who's a slave soldier, had been bought, he would serve on foot as an assistant to a cavalryman for 1 year. After that, he would be given a horse and trained to ride for 3 more years. By his 4th year, he would receive a quiver of arrows and a bow case and would start training to shoot and fight. With each passing year of loyal service, his rank and honors would be increased, as would his responsibilities. He would become a troop leader, and finally, when he turned 35 years of age, and assuming he would serve the role honorably in every respect, he would be appointed governor of a province or would become minister. Unfortunately, this system has not been followed by rulers lately. Yes, the Mamluks. Perfect. All right. Okay, so these are military soldiers. So they kind of take them, they train, they're slaves, right? They take them, they train them, but they're allowed to move up in rank, right? To where they can even be a governor. And so does this guy like this system? Does he like it or does he hate it? Yes, he likes it, right? And is saying, unfortunately, this system has not been followed by rulers lately. Okay, I'm going to guess there's going to be some sort of point of view or something on an argument here because he's given his opinion. All right, let's try this first one. Which of the following describes al-Mulk's purpose for writing this excerpt? Okay, so why is he writing this? Why is he saying, wow, they don't follow this anymore, right? A, to compare the Seljuks' governing practices with other states. B, to argue the need for following Sharia law. Let me know if you don't know what Sharia law is. C, to demonstrate that past governing practices were exemplary and should be reinstated. Or D, to argue against the use of slave soldiers. Okay, so Sharia law under Islam, Eric, help me out if I don't get this quite right, is like your very strict, like religious law. So your civil law is also religious law, right? So back then with like Islam, they didn't have separation of church and state, right? And so it was very strict kind of religious law, I believe. Yeah, Sharia means law. Right. And so, Eric, I'm right on that. It was like very strict, tied to the religion. Whereas in the US, we have our laws say aren't exactly tied to Christianity or Buddhism or a certain, yeah. And it can be strict or not. Okay. All right. So maybe that wasn't an awesome answer choice. Now, here's the other thing. If you don't know what something means, don't pick it as an answer choice. A lot of students are like, well, I didn't know what it meant, so I bet that's the answer. And I'm like, why would I give you like a question on something we haven't covered? Okay, so what do we think on this one? The purpose. All right, good. C, to demonstrate past practices were exemplary. And this is where also students are like, well, I didn't read the whole thing. Well, it gives that away in the bottom here, right? Okay, let's see, next question. Knowing that it rules for life is interpreted and set by Muslim scholars. Okay, so there is some of that tied to the religion. Okay. All right, this is not my expertise, but I think we still work through that question. Okay, what other empire also used a similar system of conscripting slave soldiers at an early age while training them for a life of military service that could lead to high-ranking positions? All right, you may not have covered this one again. Okay, so let me know, is this irritating that there's answers that you haven't covered? Because I think we got carried away trying to write really good questions aligned with College Board. And I think it might be irritating that, oh, what's another one I can't answer because I haven't covered that yet. So you can kind of put something in a little bit. Okay, that's what I'm guessing. All right, well, does anyone know the answer to this one? This one is the Ottomans. All right, so they're going to have a Janissary army. So this is a good continuity to start thinking about. So a lot of the Muslim empires, they keep this idea of the slave soldier. And so the Mamluks would, what did Ali say? I mean, it's not that it's irritating. Okay, there we go. Just take it as that. You're getting a preview of what's coming. But when we do this for the next unit, we can not do the ones that you might not know. And as we go, we'll be able to tie back, right? Yeah. And the Janissaries are super important. So just kind of keeping them in mind. I feel like there's more questions about Janissaries than the Mamluks, but they're the same thing. They're a really good continuity to know and be thinking about. Okay. All right. And so, y'all are learning. I'm learning. I always learn so much from my students. So definitely give us some feedback, and then, we can make the streams be as useful as possible to you. Okay, this one. Okay, so this is just our recall of facts. So if you've gotten to this point, hopefully you know the right answer. Okay, the Seljuk Turks invaded and toppled which of the following empires? Okay, A, Byzantine Empire, B, Umayyad Caliphate, C, Abbasid Caliphate, or D, the Mongol Khanate? Okay, yes, we are correct. The Abbasid Caliphate. Okay, good. Let's go. Last one. Oh, you're doing this one. Okay, good. And we just picked a sample, right? We're obviously not covering everything that was in the time frame, but I'm glad you're getting them right and you're helping us to write better questions. Okay, this is our last set. Okay, This is an area that I struggle with, is Southeast Asia. And it's always been part of the course, but never really had to. It's one where you're like, I don't have to focus on it. And now it's kind of more important this year. So this is helping me learn here too. So let's see what we've got. Okay. So this is like Malaysia, Indonesia, India would be up here on our big map, Southeast Asia, Cambodia, Vietnam, right? I think. And then, let's see if I say this right. Majapahit Empire during its heyday in the 14th century. So that would be our 1300s. So we've got a map here, right? And islands, right? Okay, and then here is a deified. Do we know what deified means? So deified would mean like turned into a god, right? So deity is a god. So it's a deified portrayal of Raden Wijaya, founder of the Majapahit Empire. All right, so he's the founder of the empire. So he's the king, but he's portrayed as a god. So he's portrayed as Harihara, the half Shiva, half Krishna god. And this is in Jakarta, Indonesia, which it's in there somewhere. Sorry. There's a reason I don't teach geography. It's not my favorite subject. Okay, so let's look. So the first thing I think of, well, if we're talking about Shiva and Krishna, which religion are we talking there? Go ahead and put that in the chat if you know. Okay, Hinduism, yes. All right. So, okay, so there's going to be obviously some influence of Hinduism in the area. And this is why it's so important to read these. Students will always say, oh, if I had just read that. And I'm like, what do I tell you every day? Okay, so let's look at the rest. So we've got a map. We've got a Hindu god king. All right, which of the following best describes, and again, this is where College Board, like, there might be more than one answer that is technically correct, but it's gotta be the best answer. It's gotta go with the map and the statue. Okay, which of the following best describes the historical context for the development of a powerful maritime state as shown on the map above? Okay, so it's asking you for historical context. So what kind of thing is happening in history? And this helps you out. So it's a maritime state, right? Do we know what maritime means? Like ocean. So this is an ocean kind of kingdom. Okay, good. So what's the context? So what's the big process happening? Is it A, the growth of trade in spices and textiles? B, the decline of powerful empires that promoted commerce? C, the rise of overseas colonization and imperialism? Or D, the growth of expanding empires that also sought to spread their state religion? Okay, we're looking at A or C. And so, well, we'll just, okay, it's actually A. So this is kind of the historical context, right? And so the growth of trade in spices and textiles. So this is kind of in our Silk Road time, right? Our Indian Ocean roads. I kind of blended Unit 1 and 2 together. If your teacher's strictly doing Unit 1, you might not have gotten to those Indian Ocean roads quite just yet, but they really kind of blend. Although this should be covered in Unit 1. So one of us put it C. Okay, so overseas, when I move, I can't do that with my cursor. Overseas colonization and imperialism. So that's where they're actually taking over different countries. And the colonization usually refers to like colonization of Americas. So that's a little bit later. And then imperialism, again, is where countries are taking over existing, or empires are taking over existing countries. And that's actually something like in our 1800s. So again, if you were later in the course, you'd be like, no, that was a little bit later. So you would not have picked that. Okay, so this is basically, it was during a time of trade, and that's what created this big maritime empire. let's go to the next one. All right. The statue best illustrates which of the following continuities in state building in the period 1200 to 1450. Okay, so continuity. So if you recall, continuity is something that stays the same. All right. So what has stayed the same in state building? A, state support and protection of trade as a means to develop the economy. B, use of religion to support state legitimacy. C, state enforcement and spread of monotheistic religions. Or D, use of consent of the governed. Okay, Robert, I like your answer. So here you're like, well, A is true, but does it go with the statute? Right? So states did support and protect trade, right? They protected the Silk Roads, the Indian Ocean roads. They didn't want pirates or bandits. They protected that and developed the economy. But what does that have to do with the statute, right? So if they were asking about the map, maybe A would be the correct answer. Let me go to, so it is B, the use of religion to support state legitimacy. And so that's where you've got to make sure and read, oh, it's the deified, God king. And so this is actually a really big concept. So as countries are building their states or empires, there's many things they do. One, develop their trade and economy. That's one way to develop their empire. Another is they've got to, create their power and keep it. And so they like to use this word, legitimize their power. So it's basically prove they should be your king, right? Or your emperor. And so using religion to do that is a big thing, right? And so there's this Hindu idea of the kind of God king. And so this is going to go into Indonesia as you've got, kind of Hindu merchants and people spreading out. That idea is going to travel with them. And so we'll see this back in Europe. Was it the Byzantine Empire? He often had a halo. So when you look at the mosaics, this is kind of Western Europe. He'll have a halo, kind of identifying himself with God. Yeah. Okay, let's go to the next one. Okay, I'm going to keep you a couple minutes over. All right, which of the following most contributed to the figures used in the statue above? All right, so which contributed to the figures? Okay, so what contributed to, I guess, the Hindu figures? That's what I think we're going with. A, diasporic communities from South Asia settling in Southeast Asia. We might have a vocab word that we need to define there. B, conquering and colonization of Southeast Asia. C, religious syncretism, maybe another vocab word. And D, state patronage of the arts. Okay, so diaspora, we are going to have another stream on that. I'm doing that stream next week or the week after. But diaspora is a big word to know. So a diaspora, it means like dispersion, right? So it's this kind of spread out of people. So we say there's an African diaspora, right? So a lot of people from Africa have moved to other places of the world. So whether it's forced by slavery or because they want to move, right? There's a large African diaspora, kind of diffusion of people. There's a big, yes, that was my next example, a big Jewish diaspora, right? Even well before, after AD 70, yes, all right? So well before the Holocaust, right? The Jews weren't very welcome in their own kind of homeland. So, they got caught in slavery in Egypt. They've moved all around the Middle East. And of course, by now, all around the world. Okay, awesome. So it's that kind of spread out of communities, right? Or spread out of certain people. So could we say there's a Hindu diaspora in Indonesia, according to this statue? So yeah, we could definitely say there's like a Hindu diaspora here. Okay, So yeah, okay. Thanks. I know it's hard to get the wait time and for y'all to talk, for y'all to type. I just think everyone's ignoring me. Okay, I just think I'm not giving enough wait time. Okay, so this one is A. Okay, so this is the one where you don't know what the word means and it is the answer. Okay, so diasporic communities from South Asia settling in Southeast Asia. Now this also irritates me because why don't they just say India? Like I know what India is, but you need to know South Asia, they're mostly talking about India, right? And then Southeast Asia, Cambodia is Cambodia, Vietnam, Laos, and kind of this Indonesia, right? Going east, east, east. So yes, so this would be the spread out of like those communities. And then we're going to do more on in a later stream. So look out for that one about the diasporic communities. And so I was making like a benchmark, a 9 weeks exam for my students yesterday. And, I'm pulling questions from, College Board and stuff. And I can't tell you how many answer choices were diasporic merchant communities. So we need to know that that is a big concept. Robert, yes, that always bothered me how India is always South Asia. Because I know you're like, I don't know what South Asia is, but we really do. Okay, I think I have one more, or that was it. Yes, so it wouldn't be syncretism because it's only Hindu influence. So religious syncretism, I'm assuming we'll have a stream on that as well. That's one of my favorite topics. It's the blending of two religions. So earlier we had Neo-Confucianism, which is a blend of Buddhism and Confucianism. And so sometimes they blend into a whole new religion, like Neo-Confucianism, or the blend of Islam and Hinduism is Sikhism. And so that's a whole new religion with a little bit of both. There's religious syncretism in Christianity with native religions. So I think, voodoo is one with African and Christianity. And then we're in Texas, so we've got a big Mexican-American population. And so the Virgin of Guadalupe is pretty much taken from an Aztec goddess, Tonantzin, and they basically just replaced Tonantzin with Our Lady of Guadalupe, and there's a whole lot of blending there. But we'll save that for another stream. But yeah, so if there was maybe, although I don't want to confuse you, this area will have a big influence of Buddhism. So there probably are some syncretic statues there, but not this one. Yeah, so that's why it would not be syncretism. Okay, awesome. You know what? Did I have one more? I do have one more. Okay. Which of the following was a significant change in the centuries immediately following the statue and rise of the Majapahit Empire? Okay, so this is another going forward. So of course, we're going to leave you with one of those irritating questions, but you're going to know a little bit more than your classmates, and you know what to watch out for. Okay, which of the following was a significant change? Okay, in the century immediately following. So in your next time period that you haven't gotten to yet, who's basically going into this Indonesia? So creation of Muslim states, creation of Dutch, creation of Chinese states, or creation of British in this area. Okay, AP Euro, I love it. Okay, but it's gonna be, did I switch the order on those? I think I did. Sorry about that. It's this century immediately following. So if we're in like 1200s or 1400, 1300s, so you've got your Hindu community that comes in this area and is controlling the trade, and then your Muslim empires are going to come in and control it. So this one is really specific. I don't know that College Board would give you a question quite so specific. They are more likely to go, I feel like, and chime in, Eric, if you disagree, but I feel like they're more likely to go into the later and want you to point out Dutch, because the Dutch will control the spice trade, but that's going to be what in our 15, 1600s. So, okay, all right. So 1602, of course, you've got the exact date. Very good. All right, so practice makes perfect, right? Get a prep book. I've got 5 steps to a 5. This one, it's fairly aligned. It has a decent amount of practice questions. So there's 5 steps to a 5. There's Barron's. I feel like Princeton Review isn't always really great with. They're better with math and science, but it just depends. Make sure when you get a prep book to practice, make sure it has the stimulus questions. There's some old ones out there that don't even have them. This AMSCO book is really awesome. Your teacher probably likes it, but I don't think it has enough practice questions and there's no answer key in it. So that's going to irritate you, or it would irritate me if I'm trying to practice. But, take a look around. I like to get these prep books at half-price books. Don't pay full price because there's going to be plenty that aren't even marked up that you can go in and practice. All right, good. You like the 5 steps to a 5. I think it's pretty decent, yeah. And AMSCO, I like AMSCO. It's a lot easier to read than your big textbook. But yeah, it's a little weak on the practice. And then their practice questions are often super tied to their readings, and College Board is not reading AMSCO, so it's not perfect, but they have some hard questions in there, so it's actually really good. But if you like this, give us some feedback. If we need to do one of these with every unit, we'll write test questions. It's really hard, but it's actually really good to write them. And work with y'all with them. And then again, test corrections, go over your tests. That's really the only way you learn. And I know I don't hand tests back because of the whole, cheating issue and someone who is absent hasn't taken it yet. But I always have students come in, let's look at your test, let's work through it. Okay, so you want to stream every unit, okay? I can live stream, okay. All right. Every minute. Okay, all right, so you're putting me to work. Well, are there any questions? Thank you so much. It was a lot of fun, and if there's certain areas, email Fiveable, let us know, and we will definitely work on it. All right, thanks for tuning in.